Hey everybody, hope you had an amazing Thanksgiving holiday and ate lots of great food, spent time with loved ones that you actually enjoy spending time with, and the political discussions were hopefully kept at some kind of a minimum. I'm back for another haul video this week. I didn't really want to get on camera, and I just kind of got deluged with things that came in the mail. There was a great sale on the NYRB Classic Series, as they always do their monthly sale in November, so I took advantage of that and also picked up some things that had just were irresistible to me. So let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about each one in very brief, and I'll showcase some of the stuff I've gotten. So first things first, and hopefully it doesn't fall. This is Penguin's Weird Fiction series that they put out right at the end of October. I had caught wind of these on the Outlaw Booksellers YouTube channel, and I could not resist buying them the next day. So I imported them from the UK, and boy, look at those covers. Now, a lot of these things are weird fiction tales from the turn of the century. There's a little bit of 1920s, 30s weird fiction. A lot of it, of course, is derived from Lovecraft or the stuff that inspired Lovecraft. You'll see William Hope Hodgson's The House on the Borderland, a story that my friend Tori says is one of his favorite books of all time. So looking forward to reading that. We've got Ancient Sorceries by Algernon Blackwood, which is like his, for lack of a better term, kind of a John Constantine of the early 1900s, but that's probably a really stupid way to put it. But man, I love that cover with the cat. And then we've got the actual weird fiction anthology that Penguin had put out sort of as like the leading publication in the series. Let me put these down before they fall. And we can just kind of look and see what's in there. I haven't actually opened these at all, but if you want to see the table of contents here, hopefully you can see that. You can see that we've got Edgar Allan Poe, W.W. Jacobs, The Monkey's Paw, oh boy. M.R. James, got a little Arthur Conan Doyle, which is weird. I don't know if that's actually weird fiction, but maybe that makes it more weird. Some Edith Wharton, okay. Mason Clare, and of course H.P. Lovecraft and D.K. Broster, who I'm not familiar with. So a strange collection, but great cover. Very late 60s, early 70s, which I am a big fan of that design scheme. And then, of course, the last two, we've got The King in Yellow and Claimed by Gertrude Barrows Bennett. There's not much to be said about The King in Yellow, really. Most editions of The King in Yellow, for you true detective fans, whatever's left of them these days, have not only the first four sort of horror, weird fiction-based tales, but also a number of romantic tales that Chambers wrote around the same time, and he just used it to fill out the rest of the collection. But this book is literally just the four stories from the sort of initial King in Yellow stuff, which is all people really look for, like The Repair of Reputations and The Mask and The Yellow Sign and such. So, yeah, this is all the King in Yellow you really need. And then Claimed, this is one of the first examples, I think, of weird fiction by a woman writer. So, very important piece of work. Again, amazing art. It's like, this is just, I got this literally for the cover stuff alone. You can buy these books for free, literally, over on Project Gutenberg, or buy for free. You can get them for free on Project Gutenberg. You can really kind of get them anywhere for very cheap electronically, or even in print these days. But I just had to get the nice covers. So there you have it. Very recently, I got bit by the Cormac McCarthy bug. What great timing with that Vanity Fair article. But I swear I had been wanting to read his stuff before that happened, but it did kind of push me towards picking up some of the McCarthy stuff that I have not read, having really only had very limited experience, most of it cinematic instead of actually literary. So I decided to pick up the Everyman's Library edition of the Border Trilogy, really for cheap off the old Evil Empire of Amazon. And I will say, boy, these are much, much better editions than the paperbacks. They're just so well put together. And it includes all three of the Border books, All the Pretty Horses, The Crossing, and Cities of the Plain. I'm currently in the middle of All the Pretty Horses right now. I'll probably have more to say about it on the channel in the coming weeks. But a really beautiful book, and I get the hype for sure. At some point, I'm going to read the rest of these as well as Blood Meridian. which I've had on my to-be-read list now probably for a decade. So just moldering on the shelf. So I really looking forward to finally tackling that colossus in my blind spot list. But yeah, Everyman's Library. I got to get more of these. I kind of like these more than Library of America, to be honest with you. I feel like the paper quality is a little better, and I think the hardcovers just feel a little sturdier. They feel a little heftier and bigger, whereas Library of America has like sort of that Bible feel, which I don't mind. I love Library of America, but I don't know. I think Everyman's Library is doing great work here, even if I think the covers are a little dull. It's fine. I'll take it for what's in between them. Now let's move into the NYRB stuff, which a lot of you nerds are probably waiting to see what I picked up. Yeah, it was a good haul. I think I got like 8 or 9 books. Anyway, let's start with the noir stuff, because in the last haul, I picked up a lot of crime books. I ended up picking up a few more thrillers. On the right, you see The Big Clock by Kenneth Fearing, which, funny enough, was on our Noir-vember movie list to watch last month, which we never got to. I think we watched literally one noir movie. That's kind of how it works, though, isn't it? You expect you're going to watch like 20 of these things. You watch one, and you're like, okay, that's enough. That's fine. I got the bug out. But reading them is a different story. I can read a whole lot more mysteries, I find, than actually watch them, especially the black and white variety. But Big Clock, Kenneth Fearing, classic story of the last man to see a woman who has disappeared is the man who is engaged in trying to find that last man. So I'm excited to check that out. And then Sand by Herndorf on the left. The last work, I think, of a well-regarded and departed German writer. This sounds like a little bit of a mind fuck, pardon my language, in terms of like how it approaches the mystery genre and the thriller genre, and sort of like a man wakes up with no memory, and where was he, what was he kidnapped for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think that is going to be a truly thrilling book to read. Now on the LitFic front, I picked up a few things too. Just trying to be a grown-up reader. If the McCarthy didn't already tell you that, I am definitely trying to move past my genre roots as much as I can, and as much as my interest will carry me. On the left, you'll see The Go-Between by L.P. Hartley. I can't remember. I know that's been adapted into a movie, maybe by Hal Ashby. I can't remember the filmmaker, but if anybody wants to catch me before I look it up on Letterboxd later, you can tell me. But I picked that up because I had asked Bill Ryan, who writes over at The Bulwark and a few other places, on Twitter, when I was still on Twitter or X or whatever the heck you want to call it. And I'd asked him, hey, what are your top 5 NYRBs? I'm trying to read like an adult for once. And he recommended The Go-Between as one of his all-time favorites. So I picked that up. I did not pick up the rest just because I still wanted to pick up some other specific things that you're seeing in front of you. So I plan on getting to that relatively soon. But it sounds like a nice coming-of-age tale in well-to-do England. In the middle, Melville, a novel by Jean Giono. Now, this is probably the book I was most interested in picking up. It is a very, very short work. I think it's more like novella length at best. And the origin behind this is fascinating. Giono was tasked with writing an introduction for the French translation of Moby Dick in the 1940s, I believe. And instead of writing your standard, Herman Melville was born in blah, 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 and these were the works that inspired him, and these are the themes you'll find in Moby Dick to be aware of, he decided to write his own sort of fictional narrative that's like, I don't want to call it an adventure, but it is sort of one. Really sort of retelling the creative process that drove Melville's creation of Moby Dick. And so there will be things like Melville falling in love with a woman and being sort of mused into Moby Dick, and there are bits where he wrestles with an angel, and it's sort of a totem for the creative process. And this is a very short work. I think it's like 150 pages. Let's see. Oh man, it's not even that. It's like 100 pages max. So I've never met Moby Dick is the thing. That's a really embarrassing admission I have to make. But I picked this up. My thinking is that I'm going to read this before I read Moby Dick, just to make it just a little more fun and a little more existential. Because Moby Dick needs expansion, doesn't it? So that's my big goal for 2025, and I definitely plan on making a pretty fun video out of that. So be on the lookout. Kyle's reaction to Moby Dick in 2025. And on the right, here's The Longships by Franz Bingston. 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 All right, I'm gonna say Bingston. Okay, sorry, my friends in Northern Europe. Deepest apologies. Now the Longships, I only picked this up because I thought the cover looked awesome, and I'm a pretty good casual fan of stuff like the Vinland Saga and Robert Eggers' The Northman, and this kind of scratched what looked like a similar itch to me, sort of a decade-spanning saga of war and Vikings and sea battles and all kinds of just fun Scandinavian lore, and well, I couldn't resist. And again, that cover looked awesome. So I know you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but I had to. Also, like, compared to the Melville, which is 100 pages, this is like 500. So it's like 5 Melville novels. So I'll get to that eventually. But I think it's a really cool addition to my collection. And to me, sort of a rarity in the NYRB canon. There's not a lot of adventure-based books. So that in of itself felt novel. So I had to get it. And last up in the NYRB selections that I made, I've got 4 sort of speculative fiction pieces. On the left, the great late Christopher Priest's Inverted World, which I had in the SF Masterworks Gallant's collection, which I had bought last year. Never got around to it, but I really hated that cover, and I don't love SF Masterworks liveries in general. I try not to hang on to them too long and just kind of pass them along to kids who might be interested in them instead. But, you know, someone like Robert Silverberg, who doesn't have much in print, that's somebody that I have to have a lot of SF Masterworks of, but otherwise I try to get better versions of them. And that's why I got Inverted World. And I've actually never read any Priest. I have this and I have the Prestige. You know, he's the author of the source material for that great Christopher Nolan movie, The Prestige. One of my favorites. Probably pre-Oppenheimer. I think that was probably his best written film. And he had dynamite source material, it seems. So that makes sense. Inverted World seems like a really fascinating concept. My friend Matt is a huge fan based on a post he made pretty recently on another friend's Facebook page. So I'm going to dig deeper into that soon. And then on the right, we got Store of the Worlds by Robert Sheckley. When I was at a sort of a secondhand store recently, I saw a bunch of paperbacks of Sheckley, like novels, collections. I think someone had either passed away or just kind of dumped their dad or grandfather's or uncle's collection. That's what I generally see whenever I see books like a bunch of old sci-fi paperbacks and stuff. I think, oh no, someone must have passed away or an attic was cleaned out. So anyway, this is a pretty solid collection of Sheckley stories, kind of a satirical science fiction writer. And I think the best description is probably that he's sort of a precursor to Douglas Adams. Maybe less slapstick, but still in that same kind of knowing vein. And that is a really great collection that I'm glad NYRB has like put back into circulation, because there's not much Sheckley out there. And then behind them, we've got Hav by Jan Morris and Compulsory Games by Robert Eichmann. I'll start with the Eichmann. So I had been interested in reading some of his work for a while as the big horror reader that I am. And I had been keeping my eye on some of the Fader and Fader paperbacks. They have books like The Unsettled Dust and Cold Hand and Mine, which I think are generally considered his masterworks, or at least better examples of his work. But Compulsory Games is what NYRB has put out, which I think is sort of a uncollected hodgepodge of later Eichmann and stuff that had never been collected before. People tell me it's not a great starting point. Actually, it's probably the least of his work, but I don't care. I'm a completist and I wanted to read them. So I picked it up. It was cheap. Why not? And, you know, if I find anything of value there, I will go back and get some of those Fader and Fader books too. On the left, we've got Jan Morris's Hav. Man, if you know anything about me, you know I love a good fictional travel log. And this is apparently one of the best, right there with Le Guin's Orsinian Tales, which I enjoy quite a bit. You know, this idea of writing a journal entry, travel brochure type writing, exposés of places that don't exist. That is so fascinating to me. And Morris, she herself was a well-regarded travel writer of real places. But this was her opportunity to work sort of in the speculative mold, diving into her own created country. And she revisited it once, excuse me. Like the initial book, I think Letters from Hav came out in 1986, I believe. Yeah, Last Letters from Hav came out in the late 80s. And then Hav of the Myrmidons, Hav of the Myrmidons came out, I think, decades later. Yeah, 2006 or so, maybe. Anyway, this is an omnibus of them both. And this is probably right there with Melville as like the top things I've been wanting to read for a while from NYRB. Speaking of trippy cover work, this is the set of paperbacks that I picked up at this, I guess it's like sort of a vintage store, but also a place where people kind of sell their things, like a thrift store, sort of / estate store, what have you. And these were, I didn't pick up the Shecklys, but I did pick up these 4 paperbacks. On the right, you've got The King of Elfhand's Daughter by Lauren Dunsany, which is like I think it's like the anchor of pre-Tolkien fantasy, really. I've never read it, and I've always wanted to. And I don't know, when it looks like that, I had to pick it up. So I picked up that Ballantine edition of that. On the left, you've got Nightwings by Robert Silverberg, which is one of his peak era novels. I love Robert Silverberg. I think Book of Skulls, Dying Inside, Lord Valentine's Castle, all really excellent stuff. I haven't gotten to Nightwings, and you know, no, it's not about Dick Grayson the superhero. It's actually sort of a science fantasy type tale. So I'm looking forward to reading more of one of my favorite SF writers that he's still with us, which is such a blessing to say. Behind it, if it again does not fall, oh, there it goes. Oh! And then behind them, we've got 2 Lynn Carter edited editions from the old Ballantine fantasy series. And I should say, if you're interested in learning more about those Ballantine books from the 60s, you really ought to check out the Library Ladders video that just dives into the entire line. It's a really, really fascinatingly put together video. And I do think that Bridger over there at that channel, he's as good as it gets when it comes to booktube. So check it out, and you can learn a little bit more about the work Lynn Carter was doing. But yeah, Carter, you know, not a great writer. I've got a few of his Godwayne books and some of the Thongor books, which are like Conan ripoffs, and I've got his Conan pastiche stuff too. He and L. Sprague de Camp wrote a lot of Conan stories that took place in between the Conan stories of Howard, and it's not great, to be honest, but it is, to me, like, as someone who sort of loves welded together crap, I'm fascinated by that. That is something I had to own and had to read, so I still have it, no matter what. But on the other hand, his work he's edited, his scholarly work, is just really second to none. I mean, he's kind of the guy who helped relaunch fantasy in the middle part of the 20th century, along with Tolkien's revival in the 60s. So you got Dragons, Elves, and Heroes on the left, Young Magicians on the right. These books came out simultaneously back in the day, 60 years ago. And Dragons, Elves, and Heroes is a pre 18th century fantasy stuff, like Beowulf and Scandinavian myth and a little bit of Shakespeare. You know, it really kind of dives into the roots of what would eventually become fantasy in the late 18 and early 1900s. Whereas The Young Magicians on the right is a selection of excerpts from a number of writers like Lovecraft, A. Merritt, Clark Ashton Smith, and eventually you get some Tolkien as well. So it tries to be an overall survey of fantasy pre-Tolkien between these two books. Honestly, I don't know how much I'm going to read either of these or if I'm even going to hang on to them for too long. I just think they're really beautiful to look at. And as a habitual collector, there was value there no matter what. But I will say too that I smell the bags, and they definitely smell like somebody's attic. So I'm a little nervous about opening them up and seeing how bad they are. As somebody who's got a little bit of allergy issues as well, so we'll see. But good pickups for the time being. And in what's probably a bit of a change of pace, we've got Under the Hollywood Sign, the collected stories of Tom Raimi from Subterranean Press, and then Charles Willeford's Cockfighter from Picture Box. So let's talk about this Tom Raimi book first, actually. I don't get a lot of Subterranean Press books. I think their product is lovely. I've got a few on the shelf, including my Michael Bloomline collection of his short and long stories, which I had to have, and I've also got what is the other one I have? Oh yes, my Michael Swanwick book of his best stories, or at least the volume 2, because I wasn't aware of them by volume 1. Anyway, Tom Raimi, a total new name to me, but I was really sold on this idea that George R.R. Martin at one point had called him the best new writer of the 70s. He had started writing in 1973, writing sort of speculative fiction that kind of verged around the Richard Matheson territory, which is always a winning combo for me. But he tragically died like 4 years later. So this is the entirety of his work, as you can see. And I would show you the table of contents, but I just opened it for the very first time, and there you go. You can sort of see some of it right there. You've got Twila, Under the Hollywood Sign, Beyond the Cleft, San Diego, Lightfoot Stew. A lot of stories that I'm not familiar with. But I bought this not because it had been on my radar, but not because I was planning on paying full price. But every once in a while, Subterranean Press has a ding sale. And so I got this for like $10 plus an additional $10 shipping. So for like $20 all in for a really nice hardcover of really high quality science fiction and horror and potentially some crime stories, that is pretty exciting to me. So yeah, I definitely had to pick it up. Well, I think there's crime stories. Maybe it's just science fiction and horror. Anyway, whatever. We'll find out when I read it, won't I? On the left, on the other hand, we've got with Cockfighter. I've been looking for this book for months. So, I'm a big Willeford fan, as many of you know who've watched my previous Noirvember video. And I mean, I genuinely think he's Elmore Leonard, but an even better writer. So I've been looking for Cockfighter for some time after I had learned it had been adapted by one of my favorite filmmakers of the 70s, Monty Hellman, who had been the director of the incredible film Two-Lane Blacktop that starred James Taylor and Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. A weird combo, I know, but it works, and it's so much better than Easy Rider. If you get nothing else from this video, just know Two-Lane Blacktop is better than Easy Rider. But Cockfighter is his story of about a silent man who wants to become the best at cockfighting that there possibly can be. And at the same time, this is also Willeford's attempt to spin the old classic Odysseus tale. So, how these two things combine, I have no idea, but I've been wanting to know for a long time, and I'm gonna find out. This edition has been out of print now for a few years. It's strange. It was put together by Picture Box, which was, I guess, the sort of sub-imprint of Jason Harcum, who I think might be related to the comics artist Sammy Harcum. I didn't Google that, so forgive me if I got that wrong. But Picture Box teamed up with Family in Los Angeles, which was a bookstore that's no longer operating. I assume maybe the pandemic may have wiped them out, unfortunately. But they produced both this and an edition of Williford's I'm Looking for a Street, which was one of his biographical novels. And so I had to get this, and I might look for the other one too if I can find it affordably, but this was really hard to find in good condition and at an affordable price. And so I just happened to luck out on eBay and got one, and here it is right here in front of me. It's kind of fun. It's like kind of the sideways cover with the rooster, but all in all, looks pretty smashing. And you know, you've got a really nice book here. So one of my big finds for the year is Williford's Cockfighter. Anyway, that is everything I picked up for the last month, really. But let me know if you've read any of this, or if you plan on ever reading any of these books, or have any thoughts on any of them, or just want to share with me, like, oh, did you buy something in the NYRB haul? Let me know what you got, and maybe we can compare books, and you can tell me some books I need to buy. To be honest with you, I actually bought some books yesterday over at Barnes & Noble, just because I had a hungering for a specific type of book. And so I've got three or four more actually that I won't talk about right now. I'm going to save that for a different video that is going to be a little more appropriate to discuss, because I've got plans for those. Anyway, this has been my haul. We'll see you guys next week for more fun.